get going? Welcome, everybody. I'm really glad to see so many of you joining us today. This is a great topic that we have, and I'm really excited to present it to you. My name is Gayla Harkin, and I'm with the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment, and I want to welcome you all to the Iowa Community of Practice. We need to say thank you to the DD Council and IVRS for their continued investment and collaboration in bringing us all the community of practices. And this is the first in a series of webinars that are going to focus on benefits planning. So eventually I'm going to turn it over to Mistie Johnson, but before I hand it over to her, I want to do a couple of housekeeping things for you. This webinar is going to be recorded, and the recording will be shared to the mailing list after the webinar, along with the presentation and any other materials that may come up. And all the community of practices are posted to IC's YouTube channel and to the IVRS website. We have captions available for the webinar, thanks to Heather, our amazing captioner, and the Center for Inclusion, Design, and Innovation. As we go through this presentation, Mistie tells me she doesn't mind stopping to answer a question. So if you have a question, put it in the chat box and I will relay that to Mistie. And we'll have some time at the end too for questions and answers and things like that. So I'm going to get going here and hand it off to Mistie, who is with CWIC, the Community Work Incentives Coordinator, and the WIPA, Work Incentives Planning and Assistance Program. So she comes very well prepared to talk on this topic, and she's the perfect person to kick us off. And I'm going to just hand it over to her. Take it away, Mistie.
Thanks, Gayla. Thanks so much, you guys, for showing up today on our Zoom. I know a lot of people are starting to kind of get to Zoom overload. So it's really great to see this many folks hopping on this topic, which is near and dear to my heart. As Gayla mentioned, I'm the project director for the Work Incentive Planning and Assistance Project over at Disability Rights Iowa. Our base is in Des Moines. Myself and my partner Tammy Crouch are remote, and she's based out of Sioux City and covers the whole western side of the state, kind of right down the interstate and west. And I'm based up by Clear Lake and cover the whole eastern side of the state. So we split those 99 counties in half and share the Metro Des Moines area. So Polk County, Dallas County, those counties right around Des Moines, we kind of share those just for pure volume. So what I'm going to do today is cover kind of an overview of what benefits planning is and give you a little breakdown about the different programs and kind of a light touch on some of the work incentives, mainly because the rest of this benefits planning series, a couple of the folks are going to dig in deeper into specific work incentives, and we'll touch on those of which ones are coming up next as we go through the presentation. And I'm just curious, as we get rolling, where does everybody sit with benefits planning? Have you worked with a lot of it? Are you just familiar with it? Have you never heard of it before? Pop your answer over in the chat and we'll kind of get a feel for where we're at as a group. And so we can see, how in depth we need to go with each piece. And then Gayla, if I can get the okie doke to share my screen, I will do that. We'll give you time to pop into the chat there if you're familiar, a little familiar. Subject matter expert. I see a lot of familiar and basic knowledge coming up. So this series is going to be fantastic for you guys because it's going to dig in deeper to one of the, or some, I should say, of the work incentives that are super powerful and that really a few of them get overlooked just because nobody knows they're out there or they've heard of them but aren't sure how they work. So it's going to be super exciting for you to catch all of the spots on this series so that you can tap into that knowledge and also to gain some resources of who to connect with when you have questions about those work incentives. Okay. Let me see if I can share my screen here and get this PowerPoint up for us. Let's see, can everybody see that? We'll give a thumbs up if we can all see that PowerPoint. Shaking your head, Gayla, you can see it. Perfect. All right, so we will start it off from the beginning. So as I mentioned, this series, this is the kickoff. So the benefit planning series is going to help you gain knowledge and education about how folks who receive disability benefits can really be empowered financially and gain more independence. And it's going to be really important for you to be able to know that there's people to tap into for resources. And even if you just are able to give basic information to the folks, that really gives them a jump start on what they can figure out about their own disability benefits and the other supports that they tap into. And today, while we're together, again, we're going to gain a little bit better understanding of what benefits planning even is. And then I'm going to introduce you to both of those Social Security disability benefits programs. A lot of folks think there's just one program, but that's not the case. There's a couple different programs and different ways that folks are tapping into those benefits. And then I'm going to touch, like I mentioned, on work incentives and how those can promote employment and self-employment and really be helpful for folks who, are a little scared about what that impact of earnings might have on their benefits. So let's get started. What even is a benefits planner? Benefits planners provide, current and accurate information about both of those programs I mentioned, the Social Security disability insurance and the supplemental security income, or SSI. The work incentives that are available under those two programs are what benefits planners can kind of individualize to folks' particular situation. Every single one is different. Nothing is the same. And sometimes that's where the confusion comes in, is because your Uncle Joe might be receiving SSI and be able to tell you all about the way his wages are impacting benefits, where somebody else might be on SSDI, and that's a totally different thing. So it can get super confusing for people and providers who help them tap into those. It's a very complex system, as we all know. You're talking about Social Security language, Department of Human Services language, Medicare language, and that might not always be the easiest to navigate. So that's what we as benefits planners are here to help families, beneficiaries to make more informed choices about employment or self-employment. And like I mentioned, benefits planners in general, I like to kind of figure them as navigators. We're the folks who help put all those moving parts or the puzzle pieces together and really figure out for each individual what work incentives will be available to them in their situation, what will work better, what won't. Also insisting them in, transitioning if maybe they had worked in the past and are starting to get back into the employment world. If they've never worked, maybe a transition student, for example, or even someone who might be ready to dive into self-employment. That's a big undertaking and a lot of moving parts there as well. And as you can see by this list, it's not just about the benefits from Social Security that we help with. It's also about how those earnings might impact other support programs that somebody might be tapping into. Everything from health insurance to food assistance, housing. We really try to give the bigger picture, because sometimes those things can slip by us and then people end up in crisis mode, right? And we're pretty aware of how easily that can happen. So I wanted to touch on the differences between the two programs. So we're going to start off with the Title II, or Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI is probably what most of you know it by. That particular side of the program is regular Social Security benefits. That is what we pay into on our paychecks under the FICA contributions, or, to become a qualified worker, that's how you would be able to dip into this pot of money. You can also do that as a dependent of a qualified worker. It's always an individualized benefit where, it's based off of work credits and how much you have had for earnings in a certain amount of time. So there won't be two people that have the same exact amount of a cash benefit that comes to them. Of course, there's always a 5-month waiting period before those cash benefits kick in. And it comes with the federal health insurance or Medicare. And of course, there's a few work incentives that are specifically designed to pair up with the SSDI benefits. Any questions about that before we move on? Okay.
I will let you know, Misty, that you're speaking to an audience that is all over the map. So
Okay,
giving
gotcha.
a general overview and digging down however what you want to makes total sense. But we have a very widely varied audience.
Perfect. That's awesome. So feel free to ask questions as we go along. Okay, let's see if I can get this to advance now. There we go. The other program that a lot of folks receive disability benefits from is the Title 16 or Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, as we all know it by for the most part. That side of the program is needs-based and has a resource limit and asset limit. And I should mention that SSDI does not have a resource and asset limit. So just kind of backing up a second, even if you have a millionaire, if they became disabled tomorrow, that wouldn't matter. They would still, depending on how many work credits and that kind of thing, they could tap into that benefit. Where this benefit, again, is a needs-based resource limit is involved in there. As you've probably heard, the $2,000 resource and asset limit, and they're talking about liquid assets. They're not talking about the house you own or the car you drive. They're more concerned about something you can turn into cash, like a bond or, a big checking account or savings account, something like that, or maybe even, depending on what that looks like, a savings account for certain folks. So that's what Social Security talks about. There is no auxiliary or survivor benefit on the SSI side of things. And the max that you can get, and I see that number is wrong on there, this year is $793. Whoops, I hit that. So pay no attention to that 721. That is an old number. And that's as most as you can get on this side. So if somebody is receiving both SSI and SSDI, you're going to see a lot less on this side of the benefit. And then, of course, some states like Iowa have a supplement that comes in to that federal amount as well. And we may touch on that in a minute. And then there's specific work incentives that pair up with just SSI. And of course, Medicaid is the health insurance that comes along with the SSI benefit. Again, that is needs-based and resource limit, asset limit required as well. And we'll talk about that. So just to kind of break it down for you all a little bit, I made a list of each of the work incentives that pertain specifically to each side of the program. As you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, the trial work period, or TWP, extended period of eligibility, or EPE, special rules for the blind, or a higher SGA, and the continuation of Medicare all fall underneath that SSDI side of the disability benefits. And stop me if I say an acronym that you aren't sure of, because sometimes the acronyms just fly out involuntarily, let's say that. And you know that Social Security really loves acronyms, so kind of gets ingrained in your head. So stop me if I say too many of those that you're not aware of. So on that side of thing, it's kind of a phases, I like to call it. The trial work period is the first phase, then into that extended period of eligibility phase. Then after that, there's even expedited reinstatement, that a person can come back on the benefits. if the case is specific to them. And then, of course, when I mentioned the special rules for the blind or a higher SGA, this year, the regular SGA amount is $1,310 gross earnings in the month, where the SGA for someone who is stat blind is much higher at over $2,000. And then if we touch on the SSI work incentives, those are the student earned income exclusion, blind work expense, 1619B, property essential for self-support, which comes up in the self-employment piece. And then of course, a plan for achieving self-support or a PASS. And the reason I have the asterisks behind the student earned income exclusion and the plan to achieve self-support is because those are going to be really dug down in deep, more specifically in another session of the series. And I'm sure at the end, Gayla can tell you which one's going to be when. Okay, so a little more about the work incentives. With SSDI and SSI, there are some that can be worked together with both programs. Those are listed here: an impairment-related work expense, or an IRWI, a subsidy or a special condition. And again, that one has an asterisk to remind me that that is going to be talked about again later on in this series. And it's a super powerful work incentive. And that's why we chose to dig down a little deeper for you in that one. Of course, ticket to work, which is a couple of different levels. Of course, we've heard of the ticket to work legislation, kind of the bigger picture, and then the ticket to work as far as employment networks, employment supports, and benefits planning and work incentives as it comes into there. And then, as I mentioned, with the expedited reinstatement, that applies to both SSDI and SSI, where if their benefits are terminated within a certain amount of time, they're able to still request expedited reinstatement to be able to come back on the benefits without having to reapply or do a whole new application, which is really great for folks to know that they have some safety nets in place and don't have to worry about losing their benefits just right away and not being able to come back on. And as you can see with all of these, my suggestion, and I'm sure anybody else who does benefits planning is if you have an individual you're working with who receives SSDI and SSI, please have them talk to a benefits planner. It can be super confusing and pretty complex for somebody to try to figure out how work earnings are going to impact SSI and SSDI at the same time, let alone the other supports that they receive. So why in the bigger picture is the income, preservation and asset development is so important? To us, it really directly impacts somebody's quality of life, right? It's not always about the money. It's about getting off the couch, learning a new skill, maybe meeting peers that have, similar situations, just being able to get out of the house. And for mental health reasons, really feel like a person who is really contributing to their community and having a source of income that isn't dependent on those benefits. And again, it positively impacts self-confidence and a level of community participation that goes way above just that paycheck. And then two, it really changes the expectation and status with other community members in your area. And I always think about like the students in the transition phase, that having work as an expectation really changes the whole ballgame. The earlier we can be talking about work, the better. And being able to get this kind of work incentive information out to folks is super important so that they know there's safety nets and ways that they can move through that employment process and not have to worry about losing other supports that they may be tapping into. So just to give you a light touch on a few of these, the first one I wanted to make sure and talk about was the impairment related work expense, or an IRWI. And folks who are receiving disability benefits may be eligible to claim this benefit if they have something that they pay for out of pocket that directly relates or supports their disability. And something that always comes to my mind is, let's say someone has epilepsy, for example, and we know that they have to take meds every day to be able to work so that they don't have seizures and everything like that. So if there is a piece of that med that isn't covered by Medicare, Medicaid, any other provider, then they can claim that as an out-of-pocket expense and have that amount excluded from what Social Security counts as income. And that could be whether it's looking at that SGA amount, substantial gainful activity amount, or if it's just in the SSI calculation piece. And I'm not going to go into the calculation today, but just know that that is a big impact for folks who, maybe kind of riding that line between going over SGA and staying under, or maybe seeing their SSI check be decreased by a certain amount. This particular work incentive is helpful in both of those cases. And of course, it must be a reasonable thing to claim. So you can't maybe say that you have adaptive equipment that doesn't relate to your disability or your ability to work. You just have it on your day-to-day kind of stuff. You have to prove why that helps you be able to work. And some of those examples would be copays for medication, like I mentioned, even doctor's visits or therapy visits, those copays can count. Assistive technology, of course, specialized transportation. And that's not just your gas tank money, that's more like if you can't drive because you have epilepsy and you have to take transit, for example, you may be able to count those costs that you pay for out of pocket. That also includes attendant care or even service animals and related expenses, grooming, food, vets, all of those kinds of things. It's a really powerful work incentive that a lot of people may not even know exist. And a couple of those other ones that are really a great way for folks to still be able to build their assets is a plan for achieving self-support, or a PASS plan. And that is going to be a part of the series covered here in one of the next sessions. That is a way for somebody to set aside money to work toward obtaining a vocational goal. Like, for example, if somebody wanted to go to college to get their associate's degree so that they could be a medical assistant, for example, a plan for achieving self-support could help them save the money that they need to pay for tuition, books, fees, and maybe not have to pull out as much of student loans and different things like that. Super powerful work incentive. The other one I wanted to mention, which is also going to be talked about in another session, is ABLE accounts. And even though they're fairly new, it's been 5 or 6 years now that they've been going, some people still aren't real comfortable with them or know a lot about them. And I included a link on here for the Iowa ABLE account website, which is iable.gov. Again, somebody who has the eligibility to do an ABLE account doesn't necessarily have to do Iowa's ABLE account. They can go through any state that's participating, but I wanted to make sure and include this one for Iowa in case anybody was interested. And then, of course, we still have the individual development accounts from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. You don't hear a lot about those recently, but it's an awesome way for somebody to, be able to either build credit or help with housing, different things like that. And then, of course, there's the earned income tax credit for the IRS. So a little more about the ABLE account. As I mentioned, it came about in 2014. It was kind of tossed around with the government for a little while, and then President Obama signed it, that tax extenders package, which became the ABLE Act and really is now the law of the land. It's changed a little bit since its first signing in 2014, but the basis of it remains the same. And it really amended that section 529 of the IRS code to create that free savings account for individuals with disabilities. And part of that eligibility is, you have to have a diagnosis before age 26 right now. They're working to raise the age of that. And that doesn't mean you have to be receiving disability benefits necessarily. That could just mean that you have had a diagnosis documented before age 26. And all of those funds that are contributed into those accounts, they don't impact the person's eligibility for public benefits like Medicaid, food assistance, or housing. It's totally excluded from any of that, as well as the SSI resource and asset limit. They still will look at your earnings, because remember, it's about resources and assets. So somebody can't just say, oh, I'm only making $5 an hour when they're actually making $20 an hour. That's not how it works. It's more about the savings piece of it. And the really cool thing that's changed over the last, I want to say, year and a half or so, that an account owner for an ABLE account now can save more money if they're working. And it originally was that they could save, like $15,000 a year, and that was it, up to like $100,000. Now, if they're working, they can even save an extra $12,760 each year into that ABLE account. And anyone can put money into that account for that owner. A grandma, an aunt, an uncle can put money into there. And again, it does not count against any of those needs-based programs that I mentioned. So a little bit more about the IDAs, or the individual development accounts. What's really cool, I think, about those is that they're matched savings accounts, usually a 2-for-1. And it allows individuals with limited income to save money and build their assets. And again, most of those do not count against those income-based programs, like I mentioned, food assistance, Medicaid, SSI, that kind of thing. And they have a wide range of different things that they can use it for, whether that's just financial education, helping with tuition, or as I mentioned earlier, credit builder loans, or even expanding a business. Depending on what the need is, they can talk to the folks at the IDA and see what works best for them. I wanted to make sure and give you some resources as you're kind of tapping into this benefit planning gig. Your first line of defense is really the Ticket to Work helpline. I've included the number and the website on this slide, and they're going to be sharing the slides when it comes out after the recording. And what's really great about the Ticket to Work helpline is they have a call center who the folks answering those phones are trained in benefits planning themselves. So if somebody calls there, or you're helping someone to call there, their basic benefits planning questions can get answered right then and there on the phone. And they have access to know which benefit they receive. Because as we know, the people that we work with, a lot of times they don't even know which benefit they receive from. So the folks on the Ticket to Work helpline have access to that and can see that right away. And then as the conversation goes with them, they will know whether or not they need further assistance with their benefits planning, and then can either send them off to the Work Incentive Planning and Assistance Project, which would be us. I would get a direct email with that referral, and then we kind of divvy it out between Tammy and myself. Or, if the person on the phone says, hey, I'm already working with Voc Rehab, then they'll redirect them back to their vocational rehabilitation counselors. In a perfect world, that doesn't always happen, but that's hopefully what is happening in kind of that process as somebody's talking to the Ticket to Work helpline. Then the other resource is us at the Work Incentive Planning and Assistance Project, and you can get to us not only with the Ticket to Work helpline, but if you go to our website, the disabilityrightsiowa.org, there's an intake button on there. And if you can do an intake, our intake specialist sees those and gets them to us usually same day. And then we reach out to that individual or the provider or whoever it is that's making that inquiry. And then I included in the Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation's website on here. They have a cadre of benefits planners available to their job candidates, which is awesome. And they also are able to kind of dig in a little further to see, what work incentives might best apply to that individual. And then, of course, Iowa Workforce Development also has benefits planners in different offices across the state that can help with those work incentives and the employment network piece or employment supports as well. I just wanted to make sure and include a few of those resources for you. A lot of more benefits planners across the state at different agencies. More and more, we're seeing that it's agencies are getting somebody trained in-house. It just makes sense to have somebody on site that can help their job candidates and the folks that are receiving disability benefits in whatever form that might be, kind of help them navigate what that looks like as they're starting to work or maybe looking at self-employment as well. Any questions? I know I kind of ripped through that pretty fast, but if we have any questions, I'm happy to take those. And there's my contact information as well.
Misty, can you talk a little bit about what it would take for a provider agency to train their own? What does it take to actually be a benefits counselor? Is there accreditation? Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of options. There is the training that we go through as the WIPA project, which is the Social Security granted benefits planners. We go through Virginia Commonwealth University to do the CWIC training. Community agencies can also do that training, and the credential that they get is called a CPWIC. We love the acronyms, right? So it's a Community Provider Work Incentive Coordinator. And it is a little bit of a lengthy training. It's a week-long training, which right now is virtual. It used to be that you'd have to go to wherever they were holding the training for the 5 days and then have homework after that and everything. But now they're holding it virtual. And it's just a matter of connecting with Virginia Commonwealth University to see when those are available. And the part that goes through that's a pretty strenuous training. Like I mentioned, it's 5 days of the hands-on training, I guess I would want to say, in a virtual environment. And then after that, you have to go through a series of tests to be provisionally certified once. And that's like doing case studies that they provide and kind of question answers and testing out. And then after you're provisionally certified, you go on to provide them with a case study, write a benefit summary and analysis for that case. And then once you pass that, then you're completely certified with that CPWIC, however you want to say that, the acronym at that point. There's also Cornell University that does benefits planning certifications. The VCU one is the one that is under the Social Security kind of umbrella, that they're their vendor. But Cornell University has a really great training as well.
See, this is Brana. How are you?
Hi, Brana.
Great presentation, by the way. I was just laying in, but Cornell actually has one for youth benefits as well. So it's a separate training that you can do Cornell.
Yeah, Cornell has a wealth of knowledge under their belt. They've been doing this a really long time. So yeah, that's a great, thank you for sharing that. It's really nice to have that specific for the youth.
Yep.
Does anyone else have a question? Want to jump in live or post it to the chat box?
Anything else I'm going to stop sharing, Gayla. Anything else I can answer for you guys? Do you want me to go back over any of those work incentives that we talked about? I know that you're going to have some great sessions coming up. that will dig into the past, student earned income exclusion, and the subsidy and special condition ones, but I'm happy to touch on the others because it looks like we have a little bit more time left yet.
Yep. Well, if something comes up that people have a question after thinking about this, or after you go back and look at the materials, listen to the recording, you can always reach out to Misty because she's given us her contact information. So that would be another way if you start to think about it. Here we do have a question. You talked a lot about IABLE and IDA. Will there be more info on some of the other work incentives in the future sessions? Yes, there will be. The next one is actually about past plans. And they're going to take a deeper dive into the plan to achieve self-support situation. So Misty, you were part of this too. Do you know what other ones they're going to take a deeper dive on?
The subsidy one is one that they're going to be doing, which is, I was just going to pull up really quick the next date. I want to say, like you said, the next one is pass, and then we go into the third session is going to be about benefits and transition. Susie Paulson from IVRS is going to be talking about vocational rehabilitation services and how that's so critical to students, like I mentioned, with that student earned income exclusion. And then the subsidies and special conditions is in August. And that one is going to be, Brian Dennis is going to be talking about that at that session. I'm happy to touch a little more on the Iowa ABLE for a few more minutes, if that's okay.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah, happy to. Happy to. So as I mentioned about the ABLE accounts, excuse me, it's fairly new. I mean, even though 5 or 6 years have went by, a lot of people are still kind of unsure about what that even means. So just to highlight of a few myths that have been debunked, I guess, on that. And I think I maybe mentioned the first one is that an individual does not have to be receiving disability benefits to be eligible. All they need is to have a diagnosis before age 26 right now. They're hoping to up that age quite a bit. And I want to say it's like going to be 40, 42, something like that they're trying to shoot for. One of the other things that I wanted to mention, and I think I hit on it earlier, is that anybody can put money into that ABLE account for that account owner. So, you know, if grandma wants to send birthday money or something like that, those monies can go into that fund without any penalty or anything like that. And the other nice piece about that is it's not as hard to get the money back out. So a lot of times with different accounts, we've been hearing that there's been like a debit card that's associated with that account. So not that you don't have to log how you're using the money or track that it's disability related, but that it's much easier to access than sometimes maybe a trust would be or different things like that.
Misty, I have a question here related to ABLE accounts. Are there situations where it might not be the best for a member to set one up? Are there any cons to having an ABLE account?
No, not really. Not really at all. The biggest one that I've heard that is kind of a pushback from folks is that there's an admin fee for some of the ABLE accounts, depending on the state, of course, what that amount is. But it's not that much. It's like between 25 and 45, I think, dollars, depending on, and that's monthly, like an admin fee forever whoever that is. I think like Viridian does some, and there's some other agencies that are out there helping to support the ABLE accounts. But no real cons that I can think of. Because remember, any of the money that is put into those ABLE accounts is totally excluded from Medicaid eligibility, SSI eligibility, anything like that. It is money that isn't looked at by any of those needs-based housing either.
So what are some of the things that they can pull the money out of the ABLE account for? What can they use it for?
Great question. So some of the things, and I'm just wanting to pull up the one from Iowa really quick so I can give you some specifics. Some of the qualified expenses that they list are like education, health and wellness. And I have to kind of put a caveat on that. It depends on what that even means. I know we've had folks talk about being able to take a health and wellness trip and pay for a companion as well to go with, as long as they can prove or show why that's a benefit to their disability, kind of related like that. Housing, food, transportation, financial management too, employment training and support, even personal attendance, basic living expenses, where sometimes, you know, with a PASS plan and different things like that, it's a little more drilled down into specifics of what you can spend things on, where an ABLE account has a much broader scope of what you can use that money for. And that does, I think I saw something about a copay in the chat. Did it say covered copays? I'm not exactly sure what documentation they would need. I could dig on that a little bit for you, Jennifer, and see and get back with you on that. But I know that as long as you do have that documentation, how it relates to that, you can sometimes pull that money out of there for those things. Yes.
Misty, Karen wants to know what happens to the money if the person passes away. Does the state recoup that money?
In Iowa, they can. Iowa's an estate recovery state, and we have heard that that is an option for Medicaid to go after that estate, which an ABLE account would be part of the person's estate. We've also heard that people are, you know, like in their will, they would put it as a beneficiary, that beneficiary would get the money. So then it's less likely that Medicaid would be able to tap into that if it was being, you know, given to someone as a beneficiary.
These are great questions, folks.
Yeah, keep them coming.
Okay, here's another one. Even though it doesn't count toward the thresholds, does it still need to be reported if somebody has an ABLE?
Yeah, it still needs to be recorded as an ABLE account, and make sure that if you're documenting that, like let's say they're doing a re-up for your Medicaid on an annual re-up, in there you can list it all, but it just needs to be noted on there that it's an ABLE account. They may ask for some kind of documentation of that, but really those are the folks that want to know that. Social Security really doesn't, unless they ping your accounts. That's one way they would know, and they're really kind of nonchalant, I guess, about it, unless they really are curious, looking at rep payee review stuff. But yeah, you definitely would want to note that that money is in an ABLE account.
Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Anyone else have something they want to throw in here?
The other thing I'd mention too, while we're kind of thinking about some questions, is that originally when they first rolled out, we had some bumps, I guess I want to say, in some different states. We're finding that if somebody had a guardian or a power of attorney or something like that, they were finding that they couldn't open an ABLE account, which really has kind of worked the kinks out of that. And all they require, you can definitely do that. You can open an ABLE account if you have a guardian or a representative payee or a power of attorney. They just ask for documentation of what type of guardianship that is. You know, because some just have medical guardianship, some have financial guardianship. So they're going to ask for the court docs on that to see what kind of guardianship those folks have, or if they have a power of attorney or an executor, they're going to ask for that kind of documentation. But they can definitely still open an ABLE account. And they can do it all online too. They don't have to go in anywhere or anything like that. So, I mean, you can print off the information and mail it in, but it's easiest to do it online. Did we get all of the questions?
I think that that's all that's come in, unless somebody has something here as we start to wind this down.
Awesome. Another resource I would say that there is out there for folks would be Able Up Iowa. They do some amazing things for credit builder, for adaptive equipment, AT, different things like that. So, and they have financial empowerment coaches available for folks who can really help them walk through what their financial situation even looks like. So that is another piece about that asset building and really being able to gain that control over your own money and be able to really start to see your funds grow and still keep the supports if that's what you need to do. So that is an awesome resource as well.
Wonderful. Misty, thank you so much for the amazing
Absolutely.
presentation. It lays a great foundation for us as we move ahead with the next ones, the next in their series, which is going to be the benefit or the PASS plan on June 15th. And Ashley Lance from Griffin Hammis is going to be the presenter for that. So that should be a really good session to attend. I popped into the chat box a link that takes you to our evaluation, and we would sure appreciate it if you would take a moment and give us some feedback. Let us know how this was for you, and suggestions for other things in the future. So I think with that, I don't have anything else to add. Misty, any parting words of wisdom?
I don't think so. I just popped my email into the chat box. If anybody has any questions or wants me to go over anything with them on an individual basis, feel free to reach out and we'll chat and see what we can do.
Excellent. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for attending today. We appreciate your interest and hope we'll have many more of these in the future. So take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye all.